Welcome to our deep dive into the world of international pharmaceutical regulations. Today we're going to be tackling the overlapping landscape of EU Annex 1, EU-GMP, the Chinese, US, and European Pharmacopoeias, and the US FDA's QMSR. Imagine needing a life-saving drug, but its quality was a gamble depending on where it was made. Yikes, these regulations are the unsung heroes making sure your meds are safe and effective, wherever you are in the world.
It's a fascinating and complex world for sure.
Right. And we're kicking things off with the EU's power couple, Annex 1 and EU-GMP. Annex 1 got a serious makeover in August 2022. Went from a slim 16 pages to a whopping 50 plus.
That's a pretty big expansion, and it really highlights the growing complexity of sterile drug production. Think about it. Injectables, eye drops, anything that bypasses your body's natural defenses needs to be absolutely pristine. Annex 1 is laser focused on contamination control to keep you safe.
Makes sense. And it's not just a theoretical thing either. The rollout started in August 2023, with some parts coming into full effect next year.
Exactly. That phased implementation gives manufacturers time to adapt to these stricter standards.
Okay, so Annex 1 is all about sterile products, but EU-GMP is the big boss, right? It sets the quality standards for all medicines made in the EU.
That's right. It covers everything from the facilities and equipment to the people and even the paperwork involved in making those medicines. And here's something you might find interesting. Complying with EU GMP is often seen as a passport to global markets because so many countries recognize its high standards.
Wow. So it's not just about Europe.
Not at all. It's a benchmark for quality that has a global ripple effect.
Now let's hop on a plane and explore the world of pharmacopoeias. We've got the Chinese Pharmacopeia, CHP, the US Pharmacopeia, USP, and the European Pharmacopoeia, EuPh. Each region has its own rulebook for drug quality. But how do they compare? Are we talking a global pharmaceutical showdown?
It's less of a showdown and more of a slow dance towards harmony. Each pharmacopoeia focuses on ensuring the quality and safety of medicines within its region, but there's a growing effort to align their standards.
Makes sense. Smoother international trade and consistent quality for patients worldwide. I'm all for it.
But there are some intriguing differences, right? Like the CHP includes traditional Chinese medicines.
That's a great point. It highlights how these regulations aren't just cold, hard facts. They reflect cultural and historical influences on healthcare, too.
And even within this trifecta of pharmacopoeias, things are constantly evolving. We've got CHP 2025 coming up, which is expected to bring some significant updates. It's like these regulations are living, breathing documents, always adapting to new science.
Precisely. They're constantly evolving to keep pace with new discoveries and advancements in medicine.
So we've covered how the EU and pharmacopoeias regulate medicines. Now let's switch gears and talk about medical devices, from pacemakers to surgical tools. The stakes are equally high. That's where the US FDA's Quality Management System Regulation, or QMSR, comes in, right?
Absolutely. It's the US FDA's answer to ensuring the quality and safety of medical devices. It actually aligns quite nicely with the international ISO 13485 standard, again showcasing that push for global harmonization. So it's making it easier for companies to sell their devices globally, while hopefully keeping the quality consistent for patients all over. That's a good thing.
Yes. Definitely a win-win situation. And what's really interesting about the QMSR is its focus on risk management throughout a device's entire life cycle, not just during production.
Whoa. So they're thinking about what could go wrong years down the line, even after a device has been implanted or used regularly. That's some serious forward thinking.
It is. It's about anticipating and mitigating potential risks to ensure patient safety long-term. Welcome back to our deep dive into the world of international pharmaceutical regulations.
It's mind-blowing to think about all the work that goes into ensuring the medicines we rely on are safe and effective.
Absolutely. And in this part of our exploration, we're going to zoom in on some real-world examples of how these regulations play out. It's like taking those abstract concepts we discussed and seeing them in action.
Love it. Give us the nitty-gritty, the case studies that make these regulations come to life.
Okay. Let's start with a fascinating case that highlights both the challenges and the potential of global harmonization. The approval process for biosimilars.
Biosimilars, those are like the generic versions of those complex biologic drugs, right? Like monoclonal antibodies, which are often used to treat serious conditions like cancer and autoimmune disease.
Exactly. And they offer a huge opportunity to increase access to these often expensive treatments, especially in parts of the world where healthcare costs are a major barrier.
That makes sense. But I imagine getting these biosimilars approved in different countries isn't exactly a walk in the park.
You're right. It's tricky because unlike those traditional small molecule drugs, which are chemically synthesized and can be almost identical, Biologic drugs are made using living cells. That introduces a natural variability.
So even if two biosimilars are designed to be very similar to the original biologic drug, there will always be subtle differences because of how they're produced.
Precisely. And this creates a real headache for regulators. How do you assess the safety and effectiveness of a biosimilar when it's not an exact replica of the original drug?
Yeah, it's not like you can just run the same head-to-head clinical trials that you would for a typical generic drug.
Exactly. This is where harmonization steps in. The ICH, that international regulatory body we mentioned earlier, has actually developed guidelines specifically for the development and approval of biosimilars. They're trying to create a consistent framework for evaluating these complex drugs across different countries.
So instead of each country having its own set of rules, the ICH guidelines provide a common ground, a shared understanding of what evidence is needed to show that a biosimilar is safe and effective.
Precisely. And this is a huge step forward. It means a company developing a biosimilar could potentially conduct one set of studies that satisfy the requirements of multiple regulatory agencies. That streamlines the approval process and could potentially accelerate access to these life-saving treatments for patients around the world.
It's a win-win for everyone involved.
It is. But of course, harmonization is a journey, not a destination, and there are always bumps in the road.
So even with these harmonized guidelines, there's still room for interpretation and variation in how different regulatory agencies apply them.
Absolutely. And let's not forget about the political and economic factors that can complicate the approval process, even in countries that have embraced the ICH guidelines.
Okay, so biosimilars are a great example of the potential and the complexities of global harmonization. Now let's switch gears and look at a case study that highlights how cultural and traditional practices can impact drug development. What about traditional Chinese medicine, or TCM?
That's a great example. TCM has been practiced for centuries in China and other Asian countries, and there's a growing interest in integrating it into mainstream healthcare systems around the world.
That makes sense. But I imagine it presents a unique challenge for regulators who are used to evaluating drugs based on the principles of Western medicine.
Absolutely. TCM often relies on complex herbal formulations and treatment philosophies that don't fit neatly into the typical drug development model.
Right, because it's not just about isolating a single active ingredient and testing it in a lab. It's about understanding the synergy between different herbs and how they work together to restore balance within the body.
Exactly. So how do you assess the safety and effectiveness of a TCM treatment when the underlying principles and mechanisms might be completely different from those of a conventional Western drug?
It's a fascinating question. And this is where the Chinese Pharmacopeia, or CHP, shines.
Right. The CHP has been instrumental in standardizing and regulating TCM. It establishes quality standards for herbal medicines and outlines testing methods specifically designed to evaluate the unique properties of these traditional treatments.
So it's not about forcing TCM into the existing regulatory framework for Western drugs. It's about recognizing that TCM has its own unique characteristics and developing appropriate evaluation methods.
Precisely. And this has been crucial for the growing acceptance of TCM in other parts of the world.
Because if a TCM treatment is going to be used outside of China, it needs to meet the safety and quality standards of that country, which means demonstrating its effectiveness using methods that those regulators recognize and trust.
Exactly. And the CHP has helped bridge that gap, providing a framework for evaluating TCM treatments in a way that regulatory agencies in other countries can understand and accept.
It's a great example of how international pharmaceutical regulations can adapt and evolve to embrace different cultural perspectives and healthcare traditions.
It is. It highlights the importance of cultural sensitivity and understanding in the global regulatory landscape.
Okay, so we've looked at the complexities of biosimilars and the unique challenges of regulating TCM. Now let's bring it closer to home and consider the regulation of medical devices in the United States, specifically the impact of the US FDA's Quality Management System Regulation, or QMSR.
The QMSR, as we discussed earlier, aligns with the international ISO 13485 standard, emphasizing a risk-based approach to quality management throughout a device's entire life cycle.
Right, it's not just about making sure the device works when it leaves the factory. It's about thinking about what could go wrong down the line and taking steps to prevent those problems.
Exactly. Companies now need to have robust risk management plans in place, and they need to demonstrate to the FDA that they are effectively identifying, analyzing, and controlling potential risks associated with their devices.
That's a big shift from the old way of doing things.
It is. It's a more proactive and holistic approach to patient safety.
And I imagine it requires a lot more data collection and analysis.
Absolutely. Companies need data to identify and understand potential risks. They need to collect data throughout the entire life cycle of their devices, from clinical trials to post-market surveillance, and use that data to continuously evaluate and improve the safety and effectiveness of their products.
It's like a continuous feedback loop where data drives decision-making and leads to improvements in product design, manufacturing processes, and even clinical practices.
Precisely. And this data-driven approach is becoming even more important as medical devices become more complex and interconnected.
Think about all those smart devices and wearable health trackers that
Yeah.
are generating mountains of data.
Exactly. That data has the potential to transform healthcare, but it also creates new challenges for regulators who need to ensure that these devices are being used safely and responsibly.
It's a fascinating time to be in the world of medical device regulation with so much innovation happening.
It is. And the QMSR is playing a key role in shaping that landscape, ensuring that patient safety remains paramount as technology continues to advance.
Welcome back to the final part of our deep dive into the complex world of international pharmaceutical regulations.
We've journeyed from the heart of pharmaceutical manufacturing to the quest for global harmonization, and we've seen how these regulations play out in the real world.
We've covered a lot of ground, but now it's time to look ahead. What does the future hold for this ever-evolving landscape? What trends are shaping the future of pharmaceutical regulations?
Well, one of the most significant trends is the rise of personalized medicine. Treatments tailored to your unique genetic makeup. It's like having a bespoke suit, but for healthcare.
That's fascinating. So instead of a one-size-fits-all approach,
Yeah.
we're moving toward treatments designed specifically for each individual.
Exactly. But this level of customization creates a whole new set of challenges for regulators.
I can imagine. How do you ensure the safety and effectiveness of a treatment that's essentially unique to each patient?
That's the million-dollar question. Traditional clinical trials where you test a drug on a large group of people don't quite fit the mold when you're dealing with individualized therapies.
It seems like you need a completely different approach.
You're right. Regulatory agencies are grappling with how to adapt existing frameworks to this personalized approach. It might involve shifting from large-scale trials to smaller, more targeted studies and incorporating real-world data gathered from patients using these personalized therapies.
It sounds like a major paradigm shift for both researchers and regulators.
It is. And speaking of paradigm shifts, we can't forget about the growing influence of artificial intelligence, or AI, in healthcare.
AI is everywhere these days. How is it impacting the world of pharmaceutical regulations?
AI is being used in everything from drug discovery to clinical trial analysis and even to streamline regulatory processes. Imagine AI algorithms sifting through mountains of data, identifying potential drug candidates, or predicting adverse reactions before they occur.
That's incredible. But with great power comes great responsibility, right? How do we regulate AI in healthcare to ensure it's being used safely and ethically?
That's a crucial question. We need to make sure these algorithms are transparent, accountable, and free from bias. And then there's the issue of liability. If an AI-powered system makes a mistake, who's responsible? The developer, the healthcare provider using it. These are all complex issues that regulators are wrestling with as AI becomes more deeply embedded in healthcare.
It's a brave new world, and the regulatory landscape is scrambling to keep up.
It is. And let's not forget about another trend that's adding another layer of complexity: the increasingly global nature of pharmaceutical supply chains.
Right, because it's not just about developing and manufacturing a safe and effective product. It's also about ensuring that quality is maintained throughout the entire journey from the factory to the patient, which is getting more complicated as ingredients and products crisscross the globe.
Exactly. A single medication might involve ingredients sourced from multiple countries, manufactured in yet another, and then distributed globally. It's a logistical jigsaw puzzle, and if one piece is compromised, the entire product could be at risk.
So how do we ensure quality control and prevent counterfeiting in such a complex global network?
That's a huge challenge. One solution that's gaining traction is blockchain technology.
Blockchain. Isn't that the technology behind cryptocurrencies like Bitcoin? What does it have to do with pharmaceuticals?
It's all about creating a secure and transparent record of every step in the supply chain. Imagine a digital ledger that tracks a medication from the moment its raw ingredients are sourced to the moment it reaches the patient. Each transaction, each movement of the product is recorded and verified, making it incredibly difficult to tamper with or counterfeit.
It's like giving each medication a digital fingerprint. That would be a game changer for traceability and accountability.
It would. Blockchain has the potential to revolutionize pharmaceutical supply chains, improving transparency, reducing counterfeiting, and enhancing patient safety.
So we've got personalized medicine, AI complex, global supply chains, and blockchain. It's a lot to take in.
It is. But amidst all this change and disruption, one thing remains constant: the focus on patient safety.
That's the North Star guiding all these efforts, making sure that patients have access to safe, effective, and high-quality medications and medical devices.
Exactly. And that's why international collaboration is more important than ever. The challenges don't stop at national borders. We need global cooperation, shared knowledge, and harmonized standards to effectively navigate this evolving landscape.
So it's not just about individual countries setting their own regulations. It's about working together to create a global framework that benefits everyone.
Precisely. The ICH, the World Health Organization, and other international bodies will play a vital role in facilitating dialogue, fostering collaboration, and developing guidelines that can be adopted globally.
It's about recognizing that we're all in this together. The health of one nation is interconnected with the health of all nations.
Absolutely. We need a unified global effort to ensure that the benefits of innovation are shared equitably and that all patients, regardless of where they live, have access to the life-saving treatments they need.
Before we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought-provoking point. We've talked about the importance of regulations in ensuring the quality and safety of medicines and medical devices, but could there be a downside to too much regulation?
That's a great point. While regulations are essential for protecting public health, overly burdensome regulations can stifle innovation, slow down the development of new treatments, and ultimately limit access to life-saving therapies. It's a delicate balancing act.
So how do we find that sweet spot, that balance between protecting public health and fostering innovation?
It requires constant dialogue, collaboration, and a willingness to adapt as technology advances and healthcare needs change. We need to find that harmonious balance where regulations are robust enough to ensure safety and quality, but not so restrictive that they stifle progress.
It sounds like a complex and ongoing challenge.
It is, but it's a challenge worth tackling. Ultimately, it's about finding solutions that benefit patients and improve global health.
Well, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into the fascinating and complex world of international pharmaceutical regulations. We've explored the current landscape, the challenges, the opportunities, and what the future might hold.
It's been quite a journey, and as we've seen, it's an ever-evolving landscape, constantly adapting to new scientific discoveries, technological advancements, and the changing needs of patients worldwide.
We hope you found this exploration informative and insightful, and we encourage you to continue learning about this important topic and engage in the conversation about how to ensure that healthcare innovation benefits everyone.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time, stay curious, stay informed, and stay engaged in the pursuit of a healthier future for all.